Hello and welcome to another Rock'em Sock'em edition of Theology Thursday. We are continuing our quest through the Catechism, and we have made it all the way to the 8th Commandment. I am joined, as always, from a socially distant and outside pastor, by a socially distant outside Pastor Chris Laughlin of Messiah Constantine, but today you are at Prince of Peace Portage Church, or outside there. Why don't you tell the audience how you're doing and explain why the locale?
I'm doing great. I am all vaccinated against the flu. It's actually been a couple of days now, but I am outside because I don't want to bother my wife in her office. We've been traveling together for the day, and I'm just working from Prince of Peace, but I don't want to bother her in her office, and I don't want to wear a mask for this. So I'm outside with nice trees behind me and the wind blowing my screen. So it's a beautiful day and there are no bugs bothering me. So I'm sure as heck not going to complain.
Wonderful. And just to introduce myself to our viewers, I am Pastor James Smith. I'm currently at Trinity Episcopal Church office. One of the churches I serve, the other is St. John's Lutheran Church, both in Three Rivers. Pastor Chris, dirty little secret. This one's actually being filmed a week ahead of when you'll see it. But last night was the vice presidential debate, and I am just glad that you said that you're safe from bugs, because after watching, we all know the danger of an indefatigable fly that just kind of goes around and sticks on your head.
I didn't even think of that because I don't watch debates.
There you go. So politics and debates, even though you don't watch them, could be a good proving ground, I would say, for our 8th Commandment today.
Television sort of in general.
Yes. You are not to bear false witness against your neighbor. What does this mean?
Are you asking me, Pastor James,
Yeah,
what it means?
of course. We're catechizing here. Catechism comes from the word echo, and the idea is call and response. So I have called, and if you've got it up, you can respond. Otherwise, I'll take care of it.
We are to fear and love God. The first commandment is the basis of all the other commandments. We are to fear and love God so that we do not tell lies about our neighbor, betray or slander them, or destroy their reputations. Instead, we are to come to their defense, speak well of them, and interpret everything they do in the best possible light.
So that just happens all the time naturally. We're all
Obviously.
Good. Yeah. You identified this as well as the first and the fourth commandments as kind of your top three power rankings for the 10 Commandments.
My triad, yes.
Would you care to tell us why you include this commandment among those?
So I think the first commandments is pretty obvious, right? It undergirds all the other commandments. Luther goes on at it at some length twice in the Large Catechism. The fourth commandment, because I think we're terrible with authority in our culture, and the eighth commandment, because if you watch 10 minutes of cable news, probably only takes 5 minutes cable news, or 10 minutes of local news, and specifically the commercials, especially this time of year, we are just absolutely terrible at interpreting our neighbor's actions in the best possible light. And to be completely honest with you, I'm a deeply cynical person myself, certainly a deeply skeptical person myself, and I have trouble interpreting most people's words in the best possible light, whether that's online, and in the free and open exchange of pleasant ideas that is social media, whether it's because I'm listening to whatever politician.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first, the fourth, and the eighth commandments are ones that as Americans, especially, we need to work on. We need some serious help with. We really are terrible at following those three commandments. Now, as a good Lutheran, I must also say that we are really terrible at following all 10 commandments, especially as Jesus and Luther sort of raise the stakes and ratchet up the standards there. but the first, the fourth, and the eighth really speak to me. I do want to, very briefly, Luther's consistent in his expounding on the commandments. There is first, what we do not do, tell lies about our neighbors, betray or slander them, or destroy their reputation. And then there is what we are to do. We are to come to their defense, speak well of them, and interpret everything they do in the best possible light. And I would like to pause a moment and say one of the things we sort of danced around in previous conversations about the commandments is that words matter. Our words matter to ourselves, to God, to each other. And Jesus will say this, you are not to swear by the hair of your head or by Jerusalem. Words matter, and words matter to God, and words matter to each other.
Yeah.
So this is just a part of that words mattering piece.
Yeah. It's not. It's actually not in Proverbs or the Bible. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. The Bible is probably one of the most pro-words documents ever put together. If you think in the beginning when God created the heavens and the earth, how does God create? God speaks.
Speaking creation into being.
John 1, in the beginning was the Word. You hear the importance of truth, which I think is, if you value words, then you have to value truth, because otherwise, if your words aren't true, there's just no point to them. Which, if you watch the debates, you would know.
I don't watch debates. If I'm going to watch theater, it's going to be good theater.
That's exactly right. So I think, there's this, as you said so well, the Bible, the Ten Commandments, I think we could say God, all take words very seriously. And you think about the damage that gossip can do. It's one of those things that once it's out of the bag, it's hard to put it back in. Especially in this age where it's so easy to spread a rumor. I think one of the reasons you picked the 8th Commandment for today is it's easier than ever for gossip and false accusations, or not even necessarily false, but unproven accusations to circulate across the globe. And once you get that on your name, you can't escape it. Yeah, you look like you're about to say something, so go ahead. That's my.
Well, we in the pregame we sort of talked about this. It might even have been true once, but is it still true?
Right.
And truth with a capital T, not sort of fact truth, but true.
And I think I talked last week about one of the things Luther does with stealing, and I would say he does it with all the 10 Commandments, is trying to turn your motivation from yourself to your neighbor. So when I gossip, why am I doing it? It's to tell a good story most of the time, or sometimes I feel like in kind of outrage culture, it's to show my own virtue by attacking the right people and the right statements, even if it means taking them out of context. However, he would say, if you do have a suspicion about something, or if there's this private sin you know about, the best way to do that is not, if you actually want to fix the problem, it's not to gossip about it, it's to talk to the person directly. And Luther, like a lot of his ideas, steals that directly from Jesus in Matthew 18, where Jesus says, if someone sins against you, first talk to them privately. Then if that still doesn't work, bring a couple other people with you, probably elders in the church. Elders is in, we'd probably say counselor vestry members today, or maybe a pastor to help you out. And then with the whole congregation or whatever. So there's this kind of escalating, but the idea is to start out as narrow, as small as possible. And the goal, as Jesus says, is to gain a brother or gain a sister. The idea is you've taken someone who sinned against you that you might have either no relationship or a very broken relationship with, and to try to strengthen or create that bond. And words, just as they can destroy relationships when they're used properly, just as words created the universe, words can create new relationships too.
It's interesting you bring up Matthew 18, which the bishop spoke about several weeks ago in one of his take ones. And also Luther brings up specifically in the Large Catechism now about the 8th Commandment. Although before he gets to Matthew 18, he talks about applications of the 8th Commandment. So the first application, right, you shall not bear false witness. That he literally takes the legal meaning, right? You shall not go to court and bear false witness or testimony against your neighbor in court. The first application of this commandment then is that all people should help their neighbors maintain their legal rights.
Yeah, and let me just say that, you know, especially in Luther's time or in the time of the Exodus, you know, when Moses is giving these 10 Commandments, witnesses are kind of the number one way that you get a conviction. Not necessarily the case today. You still see terrible examples of false witnesses. But
we saw that in the Bible, right, with Naboth's vineyard.
Could you say more about that in a second? I'll just wrap up this.
Sorry, go ahead.
These days, you know, we have a lot more forensic evidence and other means of determining the truth. Back then, if a couple neighbors lied about you, like that might be game, set, match. Yeah. Anyway, why don't you tell us about Naboth's vineyard?
It was Jezebel, wasn't it?
Yeah, she convinced her husband.
Well, no, her husband wanted the vineyard, right? And he was going to buy it. He was going to buy it, and the guy said Naboth, because it was next to the king's like second or third residence, I think.
Yeah, I think it's Ahab.
Went to Naboth and said, "I'll buy it from you." And Naboth said, "No, this has been in my family forever." And the king sulks, and Jezebel, his wife, says, "Are you not king of Israel?" So she takes his wallet, credit card, and keys, i.e. his signet ring, and sends a letter to two scoundrels in the town, have a feast, sit a scoundrel on either, to the nobles of the town, seat a scoundrel on either side of him, have both of them make a false declaration about him, bear false witness against him, and then have him stoned. I think he is said to have spoken against God and the king. So they do that, two scoundrels, one on either side of him. They bear false witness against him. Naboth gets stoned. The king takes his land. Kind of like David and Bathsheba, except there it's murder and less false witness.
Or like what happens to Jesus.
Yes. Also,
I mean, you're digging for the good stories here, but you know, all the false accusations that happened to him, or even not even necessarily false, but putting the worst construction on when he talks about the destroy this temple and I'll rebuild it in 3 days, and they say, oh, he's threatening to blow up the temple, or you know, and that's one of the things that gets him killed, depending which gospel you read. So, yeah.
So that's the first application. Don't do that.
Right. Don't.
Then there's the second application applied to the spiritual jurisdiction or administration. Wherever there are upright preachers and Christians, they must endure having the world call them heretics, apostates, even seditious, and desperate scoundrels. I would also like to say, this just occurred to me, you know, this isn't license for you to be a jerk in the name of Jesus and then say, oh, when other people call you on it, oh, I'm being persecuted. No, you're being a jerk.
Yeah.
Christians do that way too often.
Christianity is, if you really want the end justifies the means, Christianity is not usually going to help you make that argument.
Certainly not the catechism, right?
What's that?
Certainly not the catechism, right?
No. Yeah, I think the catechism and Luther as well really want to take away your false self-justifications. Like, well, you know, yeah, I may have I may have ruined this guy's reputation, but he was going to ruin our country, so it was worth it in the end. Um, you may feel that way, and you may be able to make a good kind of natural law argument for it, but the catechism is not going to help you get there.
No.
Yeah. I mean, it's really a tough thing that the catechism, the 10 Commandments want us to not only want the right end, but to do it the right way as well.
Well, for the catechism, both the ends and the means matter, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you need that baby bear middle of the Venn diagram of good ends and good means.
So then there's the third aspect of this commandment. But before we go there, Pastor James, so if I am to interpret everything my neighbor says or does in the best possible light, oh no, actually, let's not go there yet.
Okay, let's not go.
The third aspect of this commandment, which applies to all of us, forbids all sins of the tongue by which we may injure or offend our neighbor. Bearing false witness is nothing but a work of the tongue. God wants to hold in check whatever is done with the tongue against a neighbor.
Mm.
This applies to all false preachers and their blasphemous teaching, right? Even given what Luther just said. To false judges and witnesses with their rulings in court and their lying and malicious talk outside of court. It especially applies to the detestable, shameless vice of backbiting or slander by which the devil rides us. Of this much could be said. And then he goes on to say much. To avoid this vice, therefore, we should note that none of us has the right to judge and reprove a neighbor publicly, even after a sin has been committed, unless authorized by a judge and reprove. There is a very great difference between judging sin and having knowledge of it. So we are to interpret what they do in the best possible light. We are not to slander. We are not to gossip. We are not to judge, right? Pastor James, we don't say anything bad about anyone else. Ever. About anything.
Yeah, I feel like you're trying to goad me into an answer, but I agree with everything Luther said so far. I'm thinking of I believe it's the story of the Good Samaritan that gets set up. No, it's not the Good Samaritan. It's one of Luke's famous parables gets set up by the two brothers arguing about who should get the inheritance. And Jesus responds, who made you judge between the two of who made me judge between the two of you? And I think what Luther is saying with that last part about there's a difference between witnessing a sin and judging it is you may witness something bad that's happened, but it may not be your place to make the public declaration that this wrong has happened. Now you always would have a place as a friend or as a fellow human being to confront the person privately, but it's not everyone's role to go around pointing out the speck in their neighbor's eyes.
Well said.
We're going to get to the loopholes in the rule here soon enough, but I don't think so far we're there.
To avoid this, oh, I already said that, didn't I? Yes. Learning a bit of gossip about someone else, they spread it into every corner, relishing and delighting in the chance to stir up someone else's dirt, like pigs that roll in manure and root around in it with their snouts.
Luther loved the image of pigs.
Oh, man. Irrational. He called the common people irrational pigs. This is nothing else than usurping God's judgment and office and pronouncing the severest kind of verdict or sentence. For the harshest verdict a judge can pronounce is to declare someone a thief, murderer, traitor, etc. Therefore, those who venture to accuse their neighbor of such guilt assume as much authority as the emperor and all rulers. For though you do not wield the sword, you use your venomous tongue to bring disgrace and harm upon your neighbor. I think here of James, the book of James, not you, Pastor James.
That's okay.
And how the tongue sets things on fire, right?
Yep. What a great blaze, is set afire. So I want to pick up on that because he talks about usurping the role of emperor. Uh, so Pope Francis once said, "Who am I to judge?" and took a lot of heat for it. And if you've been following just what we said in the 8th Commandment so far, you might say, "You're right, Pope. Who are you to judge?" But actually, Luther wants to say it's not that the world should be without judgment. Otherwise, how would we have courts to correct any wrongs? How would any wrong get corrected if no one could call a spade and say this is wrong? If there are circumscribed roles that people fall under who should do this. And so in the Large Catechism, he gets to that. He says, "So you see that we are absolutely forbidden to speak evil of our neighbor. Exception is made, however, of civil magistrates," and he's talking about politicians or judges in this case, preachers and fathers and mothers, in order that we may interpret this commandment in such a way that evil does not go unpunished. We have seen that the 5th commandment, "You shall not kill," forbids us to injure anyone physically, and yet an exception is made of the hangman. Basically, he has to do this job, in Luther's view at least. Luther believed in capital punishment. He has to do this job as part of the justice system. And so he goes on to say, "Likewise, although no one personally, you as just Chris do not have the right to judge and condemn anyone, yet if they are commanded to do so and fail to do it, they sin as much as those who take the law into their own hands apart from any office." What that means is if your job is to be a judge and you say, "Well, God said not to judge, so even though you've been duly convicted of murder, far be it for me to do anything about it." Or if you are a pastor and you know someone's committing a gross sin and showing up Sunday after Sunday and you're like, "Ho hum," what is it? Hear no evil, see no evil. What's the other one?
Speak no evil.
Speak no evil. Yeah. Or imagine I'm a parent now. It's a lot of fun. And imagine you're a parent and your kid is bullying all the other kids at the school, and you're like, "Well, I'm not going to judge my kid, so I won't say anything." That's wrong. And I think that would be kind of. I may not agree with them about the particular reason they're going after the Pope's words in this case, but yeah, the Pope should speak about evil when he sees it because he is the pastor of the Western Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, and it is within his role. But the problem is that's not for every one of us individually to go around and gossip about people. What is it? It is in the service of the improvement of our neighbor and of stopping a wrong from happening. It's about doing good within the role you have been given, rather than the thrill you get out of saying something negative about someone.
But we are not all self-appointed judges and arbiters of the truth.
Yeah, that self-appointed part's so big. Thanks for saying that. Self-appointed versus appointed by your office.
And then Luther goes on, "But the right way to deal with this matter would be to follow the rule laid down by the gospel of Matthew 18, where Christ says, 'If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone.'"
Yeah.
Here you have a fine, precious precept for governing the tongue that ought to be noted carefully in order to avoid this detestable abuse. Let this be your rule, then, that you should not be quick to spread slander and gossip about your neighbors, but admonish them privately so that they may improve. Now, it's also been my experience that, as Luther will say, public sin requires public reproof. And people don't want their sins pointed out to them. People don't want to be told they're wrong. I certainly don't like to be told I'm wrong, but that doesn't mean I'm often wrong, right? I am. But if someone digs their heels in, there's not a whole lot you can do about it, except then, as Luther prescribes, Christ teaches further, but if you are not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. And Jesus is quoting, I think, Leviticus, but it might be Exodus or Deuteronomy. But it's important, right? Thus, the people involved are to be dealt with directly and not gossiped about behind their backs. If this does not help bring the matter publicly before the community, either before the civil or the ecclesiastical court, here you are not standing alone, but you have those witnesses with you through whom you can prove the accused's guilt and on whose testimony the judge can base the decision and pass sentence.
Mm-hmm.
All of this refers to secret sins, but when the sin is so public that the judge and everyone else are aware of it, you can, without sin, shun and avoid those who have brought disgrace upon themselves, and you may also testify publicly against them.
Yeah, so when you see, when you see like a lie leader or a heresy by a preacher or something, jump in. You look like you're about ready to jump in.
Sorry.
You are allowed to argue against that because it's all happening in the open. You're not insinuating anything behind their back. Like these are their words. These are their actions. That everyone has seen it. It's out there already. You're not breaking any news, basically. That being said, I'd say there are a couple things to keep in mind. One, you'd better be right about what you're saying. Like there are sometimes we're like, oh, that sin is so public and notorious, and well, actually, what you did is you read a false news source, or you took it out of context, or you put the worst possible spin on it. Number two, it's not free license. It's not carte blanche to just attack the person's character. So
don't be a jerk.
Yeah, and so people talk about Luther's harsh writings against certain people, and I think they say, well, he should have been nice. I don't agree that he should have been nice in the cases that they were wrong, but you don't need to make personal attacks. So in that case, in that instance, I do think he fails the standard that he sometimes attacks the person rather than the crime or the argument that was being made.
The goat at Leipzig, for example.
And he didn't mean that the current way of greatest of all time.
No, he spoke German, not English.
Yeah.
And didn't use acronyms.
And then the third, I'm still wrestling with this because it's such a democratized time that we live in. Your argument may be true, but is it your argument to make? And that's hard to say, because I think a lot of times we get in trouble with politics, and I think in Luther's time it would not have been the common man or common woman's argument to make, because politics was an elite level thing. But here, in a way, we are all the prince, we are all the queen, or what, because the decision really comes down to how we will vote. So debating these things openly and even heatedly sometimes might be within our purview. So I wish I could give you clearer advice on that, but I think I think a lot of these commandments, it really does come down to here's the general rule. How do you apply that? And that's something that has to be discerned. But even by taking the time to discern, should I say this or should I post this, you'll do so much better at this than if you just shoot from the hip like all of us, myself included, often do.
It's important to note, too, that so much of what we do in our world is public.
Yeah.
Right? Two people will be talking on Facebook, and they'll be like, why is everybody else jumping in on this conversation? Because it's public. You're in the forum, friends.
Right. Yeah, Facebook it's the equivalent of that idea of Luther posting the 95 Theses on the door.
He was inviting controversy.
Yeah.
So are you.
Like there's this legend that Luther was so simple and you had no idea that he would aggravate people or get on their bad side. Yeah, malarkey. He did. And we should also know what we post. We better be ready to stand by.
I think that about covers it, Pastor James. What do you think?
I think so. Be nice with each other, but above all, be honest.
The truth matters and love matters.
Mm-hmm.
You can't hide behind love, and you can't hide behind the truth.
And words matter, as you said earlier.
And words matter, yes. Well said.
Words can hurt and make alive.
I think that about covers it for this week's edition of Theology Thursday. As always, we hope that you'll join us again next week.